What's up, YouTubers? I have an article I want to make a few comments on. This specifically is about the homeless in California, and that apparently the police are starting to enforce um, their laws against people living in their cars and RVs and vans. Anyways, how this can relate to expats is I've been saying for a long time, so has JC at Retire Cheap Asia, that as the economy worsens, more and more retirees, people on disability, people with incomes that are online but who don't earn a lot, more and more will be living in their vans, and more will be living in campgrounds. And then for a small percentage of them, they'll be living in other countries where the cost of living is quite a bit lower. Anyways, I just want to comment a little bit on this article. In California, there's a lot of homeless people, and in my opinion, that's related to the high cost of housing that's caused by special interest making it hard for people to build homes and houses cheaply. So it causes real estate prices to be high. And incidentally, California has non-recourse loans on real estate. So what that means is you can borrow $1 million in homes or one home, and it's non-recourse in the sense that if you want to walk away, you're not legally liable to pay it off. Whereas in other states in the U.S., they have recourse loans on real estate where they can come after you for the money, seize your bank accounts, etc., etc. Now, in other states, it is a practical matter. It's not non-recourse, but they don't come after you. They may seize your bank accounts, but they don't chase you for 20, 30 years. Just an example, not a state, but another country like Canada, all home loans, as far as I know, are recourse loans. So if you walk away, you generally have to leave the country because they'll come after you for the rest of your life. Anyways, part of the reason there's a lot of homeless is because there's a lot of rules and regulations which causes rental houses to be high in real estate, and home builders are incentivized to keep it that way because now they have above average incomes from their special interest from their building. Anyways, that's my opinion. Anyways, it looks like they made a law. These laws where they're making it harder for homeless people is starting to spread throughout all of the U.S. I've been to Phoenix a few times, and there's huge tent cities there. As a kid, I was in Seattle, and now Seattle's pretty famous for it. But anyways, let's read on. So these people are living in their campers. Here we go. Some people are hoping enforcement drives campers out of town. There's people who don't like this, obviously, which I understand. While people living in their vehicles said it is unfair, like Mr. Mac Sperry, who lives in his RV. This is an escape hatch for people living in these expensive apartments and want to get away from it, said Sperry, including or standing next to his RV in Mission Bay parking lot. A lot of people are that way. They live 2 paychecks away from the street. This is true. It's usually one. And one day they hit the street and they say, well, I don't want to be on the street, so they get a motorhome. And quite a few of them just live in their cars and vans. That's kind of a big thing. It's a niche on YouTube that's very popular now. Here's another guy. I live on Social Security. Said I couldn't get an apartment for what he makes on Social Security. That is so common. I meet so many people from Canada and the U.S. who cannot live on their Social Security check, single and married. So that's why they live in Mexico or Guatemala or Thailand or wherever. There's more and more people fleeing their countries because they can't live on whatever their pension is, or they didn't save any money for retirement, and they have to get by on their pension. So usually it's typical. I met this Canadian couple. They got, I think, $600 a month. This was years ago. $600 a month, and they worked part-time in Canada, and then they worked part-time when they were traveling to Mexico to get by. But I think most of the time in Mexico, they just lived in really cheap hotels and did it that way. But they did work part-time in the retirement. I know of another, I think it's an American couple. I don't know if they live on 800 or 900, but something like that. And then they teach part-time English to the hotels. This is not typical, but not uncommon. I've met quite a few older couples who do this because they want to supplement their Social Security income, or they don't have enough to live on. Anyways, here's someone who's for it. I'm all for it, said Doug Johnson, who works in Ocean City. I think it's becoming a huge problem. The whole homeless issue is becoming a problem. Yeah, it's true. There's like a huge homeless problem in Phoenix. When I ride my bike when I'm in the States, which is not too often, you see older women sometimes living under the bridge. Used to be men. Now you're starting to see more older women and younger women. They live in tents in the desert, and a lot of times they just throw a sleeping bag under the bridge. It's definitely not what I'm used to seeing. But I don't go to the States much, so maybe Phoenix has always been like that. But the last 2 or 3 years, I've noticed that. Hear the guys complaining about all the trash and stuff. That's understandable. But basically, what this article says is they're going to try to round all these people up and put them on these 3 state-sponsored places where they can live, which I don't know. It doesn't say from the article, but there's probably a lot of crime, and according to the article, a lot of rules and regulations. It's why people don't want to live in those areas, because they put you in one area, which makes you a target for criminals. Anyways, I don't have the answer for the homeless, but as the economy slows down, you're going to see more and more homeless in the U.S. And as the economy slows down and people have one income and it's online or something they can do anywhere in the world, you will see some of them leaving, going to Mexico. There's like a whole bunch of people who live in Mexico who either go back to the States and work, they cross the border, like they live close to the border, or they just work online and live in Mexico. But you're starting to see it a lot more in Thailand. I don't live in Thailand, but I know a lot of people in Thailand. They earn income online and then they just live there because it's just too expensive. And then there's just some people, maybe they have money, but they don't really want to spend a lot, so they live in small communities in the U.S. or they again go overseas. A lot of times when you go overseas for $1,000 a month, if you're single, anyways, you can live pretty good in a lot of countries. So it's not like you're giving up that much. Anyways, it says there's safe parking. I kind of doubt it, but I don't know what the situation is because I never stepped in my car or a van, but apparently a lot of people don't want to do this. Anyways, this is just an example of how I believe the economy is tightening. Rules and regulations and taxes are starting to tighten. So sometimes I make a comment like the noose is tightening. This is what I mean. It's going to get harder and harder to earn money in the U.S. as regulation and taxation kind of goes after more and more middle class people as opposed to the upper class. It's why I talk so much about LLCs, SA corporations, even Canadian corporations. I came across this one gentleman. He's from, I think, Denmark. He uses a Canadian corporation, and basically the way he runs it is basically tax-free. Most people don't realize Canadian corporations can be used tax-free if you have proper guidance from your accountants. In fact, there's quite a few billionaires from Sweden who use the Canadian tax vehicles to get their taxes very low or nothing. Some of the tax on some corporations, there are certain ones, it's 12%, and they can be managed in such a way that the tax is actually lower. Now, the ones in Sweden, I'm referring to the resource billionaires, the ones who invest in natural resources. Usually they go to Canada because it's relatively low tax for the corporations there. You raise money. It used to be on the Vancouver Exchange, but now it's Toronto. And then they usually have an operating agreement in usually the Bahamas. And the way that's all set up is very little tax, except for on whatever incomes they have, which usually isn't that much, usually a few $100,000. And anyways, that's why I talk about these things, because going more and more into the future, like just as an example, my mom or my stepmom, she worked as an employee, and then her company wanted to pay her as a contractor, and so she set up an LLC in the States. I won't say which state, but in one of the states. And her accountant set it up so her taxes went down 50%. Now imagine you're making $250,000 a year as a person. $250,000, your tax, I don't want to say how much, but it can be quite high as a middle class or upper middle class professional. You know, my stepmom, her tax was cut in half. So as things go forward, more and more people are going to use these vehicles, but I think the system's going to be set up in such a way as average people won't be able to take advantage of it. Only the wealthier people and people with special skills and talents who can get paid as contractors. But this is the way the economy is going, so that's why I mention it. Try to find a way to earn income in a way that you can put it in a corporation, so it's either not taxed at all or taxed very little. And more with with all the different LLCs and different laws in different states for the U.S. and Canada. There, I think they don't have different province laws for different corporations. It's all just the same law for the corporations there. But I am very aware of people using Canadian uh, corporations and bank accounts, not Canadians, I mean Europeans, to live a very tax-free life. And it's an unconventional tax haven, just as is the U.S. That's why I mention it. Now, for Americans, like my stepmom, she still pays tax, just not as much. But her accountant did say if she wouldn't have retired, probably in 5 years, she could have managed it, the corporate income, so it would be very lightly taxed, and her distribution from that would probably be zero. She wouldn't have to pay any tax. So if she was willing to work a long time, you can set income streams up in ways in a corporation so it can pay out to you in a tax-free way. You just have to pay tax on the corporate amount, which can be managed in a way there's very little. Anyways, that's why I mentioned all that. This is all going to change now. I mean, it's changing right now, but it's getting to the point where if you don't have unique skills and talents and can afford to pay for accountants and lawyers for these things, it could be to the point where the economy slows down so much that you may or may not be sleeping in a car or van. But I believe that's kind of a trend of the U.S. and parts of Europe and Canada. More and more people will be living in their vans and RVs, and more of them will find living in another country more acceptable than living in a van. So you'll see that. Just as an aside, JC at Retire Cheap Asia, he still has his website. When he started 10 or 12 years ago, he had a budget category for 300 and under. I think it was 300, 600 or 800, and then 15 or 2,000. But if he showed people how to live on 300, anyways, that so pissed off people, he had to take his website kind of private because it gets people mad. Now, I'm not saying you could live comfortably anywhere on 300. I've come across people like that here in Guatemala. They're just getting by, but it is possible, and it's better than living on the streets. But more and more, the way the economy is going, more and more people will be earning income online anyway, so it won't really matter. And I think because our economy is becoming more creative, people are going to need to use their creative talents to earn income in the traditional way of getting a factory job or an accounting or engineering job. Not for everyone, but for most engineers and accountants is going to be less and less. Like I said in previous videos, when I started at Electrolux, they had 33 office employees. When I stopped working there, it was 5 or 7. And a lot of those were accountants and engineers. They don't need them because of software programs. I know a lot of people want to argue with me about it, and I'm not claiming every job they had as an engineer and accountant they got rid of, but a lot of those tasks are just done by software. So even professionals are going to be affected by this, and you may see more and more professionals living in their vans. In fact, I've seen sites where that is the case, but these professionals prefer that lifestyle, and they earn income online, and I think over time you'll see more and more of them actually go overseas because they like the lifestyle over there even better than living in an RV or van. Anyways, I just thought I'd post this article how more and more states and counties and cities are starting to crack down on the homeless and starting to crack down specifically on people who live in cars, vans, and RVs. I'll say that way. Sometimes campers, but because people don't like seeing it, it offends people. And I really understand people who don't like seeing the homeless and the trash and garbage. I totally understand. And I don't know how this will be worked out, but in my opinion, a small percentage of them are just going to be really discreet, living in their vans, and the rest are going to, and then a small percentage will live overseas. Anyways, I just thought I'd share this and point out how this is somewhat the trend now, and what your options are. It's partly why I do what I do. I try to show people they can live in other countries fairly affordably if they want to. Anyways, I'm going to shut this video off. Like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thank you.